Okay. Because cultures evolve from their past circumstances, the early conditions of a culture matter a great deal with respect to how cultures subsequently evolve. If we're looking at Western culture, what would you say is the most important thing about Western culture? What influenced Western culture more than anything else?
Capitalism.
Money.
Money. And of course, money's really strong. Religion is huge. I mean, it controlled everything. Once upon a time in Europe, it controlled everything. The church controlled everything. They owned everything. Religion was extremely important. So money became important because then they needed to finance things. The Europeans did. And how did they finance things? Well, the only people that could handle money for the longest time in Europe, among Christians, they couldn't handle money. So the only people that could handle money were people that were non-Christian. Well, who were the non-Christian people in the area? Well, there were only two groups in Europe. One of them were Christians and the other group were Jewish. The Jewish people handled all the money. Because according to the Bible, if you handle money, you're a usurer. It's just one of those words. So people they didn't lend money, they didn't handle money, they had it, but they could spend it, but they couldn't make money off of the money. That's usury. But the Jewish people could. So how do you make money? Well, you get rid of all the Jews and steal all their stuff. That's the way you do it. And that's how the Spanish did it. That's how they financed Columbus's trip to the New World, by kicking out the Jews and stealing all their money. So, and that's okay. You can steal money. You just can't borrow money, or you can borrow money, but you can't lend money and make money off of it. That's known as usury. Anyway, so if you think about it, religion and money created the Western culture, and it still is to this day. Religion is still extremely important to Western man. So if you go to Germany, in Germany the government maintains the churches. If you go to a village in Germany, there's always two churches. One of them is the Protestant church and the other is the Catholic church. Always, in every town. There's at least one cathedral, usually two. Sometimes there's a small church and a big church, but usually there's two big churches. So, and the government is the ones that finance everything. It's all done through taxes, as confusing as that is. So yes, what happened in the past creates the culture that is established and evolves through that, whatever the cultural teachings are. Of course, we can talk about the Dene culture, of course, and all the traditions of your culture that Dene College is trying to maintain. But of course, are those the only culture? Or are they the only aspects of the culture, is a question that you have to ask yourself. And that's one that I'm continually asking. I probably should shut my... Yeah, exactly. Is the culture of Tuba City exactly the same as it is over here, closer to the New Mexico border?
Slight difference.
Ways of saying things. Yeah. Some of the ideas are just a little bit different. The critical role of early conditions is one important reason that cultural differences can persist across time. I need to cross. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to give you an example, and this is an example of two different religions in the United States. One of the religions is the Puritan religion, and the other religion is the Quaker religion. And does anybody know anything about the Quakers? You probably don't know anything about the Puritans either. The Puritans were very strict. It was a very strict religion, and the reason that they came to the New World is because they were kicked out of England, pretty much. They got in trouble. They killed the king, They beheaded the king. They took over the government for a short period of time. But eventually, of course, the armies, the aristocratic armies, defeated the Puritan armies. And at that point, of course, they decided they better come over here, otherwise they're going to get annihilated over there. It was a different religion than the state religion of England, and for that reason, of course, they had to come over here. Anyway, those are the Puritans. So the Puritans were kind of an interesting group. The Quakers, however, so the Puritans, of course, they put together an army. They called themselves the Roundheads, or somebody called them the Roundheads. Anyway, they came over here. They had to come over here because the aristocrats were kind of upset with them. The Quakers, on the other hand, remember, these guys beheaded the king, the Puritans did. The Quakers, however, they are a group that doesn't believe in violence, the Quakers. And for that reason, when they came over here, they made peace with all the tribes that they came in contact with, as compared to the Puritans who wanted to kill everybody and defeat them. But the Quakers, of course, don't fight, so they were able to make peace with all of the different tribes on the East Coast that they came in contact with, primarily the Delaware and the Shawnee. So if you were a Quaker and you had a Quaker home, then there was a symbol that you put on your house to show the Indians that you were not hostile. How's that? And I have that symbol on my house I'm not a Quaker, but I put that symbol on my house in Iowa. Not that there's any Indians around that would have any clue. It's just one of the oddities of early America. Puritanism emphasizes respect for authority and the importance of applying wealth and social position to community goals. Of course, they're talking about the culture. They're not really talking about how violent these bastards were. So it's respect for authority and wealth and social position. And of course, you use your wealth to expand the community. That's the idea. Many of the original Puritans were highly educated intellectuals, and they felt that their dream of forming a utopia would emerge only from an educated population. So the Puritans believed in education. The Quakers not so much, and we're going to talk about the Quakers in just a minute. But the Puritans, of course, believed in education. They believed if you had money, they believed that the reason you were wealthy was because God had given you that wealth, and He expected you to use that wealth to promote the community. Okay. So those are the Puritans. Interesting people. The Puritans. Of course, we make fun of them. The Pilgrims were a form of Puritanism. So the Pilgrims, the clothes that they wore, of course, had something to do with that. The Pilgrims actually didn't call themselves Pilgrims. They called themselves the Saints. Yeah.
Saints?
Saints. Yeah, we're saints. What does that make everybody else? Sinners, exactly. Okay. So you're either a saint or a sinner. You're either a follower of their religion, or you were against their, not against their religion, but you weren't going to go to heaven, obviously, because only saints go to heaven. Everybody knows that. So don't think that you're going to get to go. So my people came over on the Mayflower, but we were the guys that were working we were the workers. My family. I know. They were sinners because they weren't saints. But my relative married a chick from the other group, from the saints. Can you imagine this devil having sex with a saint? One of those odd fantasies
For the Quakers.
of the Bradway clan. Yeah, we were having sex with a saint. Philadelphia was settled by Protestant Quakers. Quakerism emphasizes pragmatic concerns, individual equality, and tolerance. And of course, the tolerance was manifested in the fact that they're non-hostile to anybody. They don't fight. They're kind of like the Amish. If you've ever seen a television show or a movie about the Amish don't fight. Neither did the Quakers. The Quakers are very peaceful people. But they're also kind of arrogant. Pricks. Oh, I said that on the video. They're kind of arrogant people. Just a little bit. Because they think that they're better than everybody else. Since they are the ones that, they can do everything that the Puritans can do, but they can do it without trying to kill everybody. So they think they're superior. Kind of an interesting group. The Quakers built the University of Pennsylvania with a utilitarian curriculum with medical, business, and engineering schools dominating the university. So they created, did I say that the Puritans created Harvard? Okay, well, I'll say that in a minute. Anyway, so we've got the University of Pennsylvania. It's one of the Ivy League schools, University of Pennsylvania. It's a Quaker school. The school received little community or financial support from the Quaker culture as it had little trust in higher education. Okay, so Quakers really don't believe in education. They believe the only type of intelligence is the intelligence you get from the Bible and from your reverence to God. So everything else is extraneous as far as they're concerned. All other education is extraneous. And you can see this through the types of education that they were looking for. They were looking for medicine. Of course, you have to have medicine. It doesn't have anything to do with God. Business, we need good business leaders. We need to educate them as to how to be good businessmen. And we need engineers to build buildings. But other than that, there's no other reason to get an education except to become a professional. A doctor, a businessman, or an engineer. As much fun as that is. Okay. The Puritans built Harvard University using liberal arts curriculum that emphasized community service, and that was it. It was just community service. And for that reason, Harvard is one of the premier schools in the United States. People go to Harvard and they come out of Harvard wanting to do service to the rest of the community, to the rest of the United States, to the rest of the world. People come out of the University of Pennsylvania to be doctors, businessmen, or engineers, to be functional individuals, but not to accumulate wealth. Not only that, the Quakers don't really support their school, as it turns out. The university received tremendous community and financial support and is today the most heavily endowed private institution in the United States. Harvard has hundreds of billions of dollars. Harvard could take their endowment and give it to the federal government and they could wipe out all of our debt. That's Harvard University. It is an honor to give money to Harvard University. It's an honor because you're supporting your community. The number of political leaders coming out of Harvard has been strong from its founding until today, and even today we have politicians coming out of Harvard University. If you hear about somebody that has become the senator from West Virginia, where did he go to school? He went to Harvard. These people want to serve their community, and they do this by, well, not only endowing money to their institution, but also by serving the community through their political endeavors. And that's Harvard. Boston's culture has maintained its elitism. Of course, Harvard is in Cambridge. Cambridge is a suburb of Boston. Boston's culture has maintained its elitism. These individuals are known as Boston Brahmins. And respect for authority that can be traced back to its Puritan roots. So it's very hierarchical, Boston is. So you've got people that they refer to as Boston Brahmins. Brahmin is a term from India. The Brahmins are the highest caste of all the people in India, the Brahmins. And for that reason, they gave the people from Boston that moniker. So the reality is, if you know anything about Boston, or you watch television, or you look at anything that's political, the idea of somebody from Boston is of the elite. So we talk about the lodges of Boston, we talk about the Kennedys of Boston, and all these are very important people politically, and they're very important as far as the United States is concerned. So what comes out of Philadelphia? Well, obviously Will Smith comes from Philadelphia. Does anybody else come from Philadelphia? Bill Cosby's from Philadelphia. Do we know anybody else from Philadelphia?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is from Philadelphia?
Oh, the movie Philadelphia.
Oh, Philadelphia. He was in the movie Philadelphia. I don't think he's from Philadelphia. I think he's from Western Pennsylvania, like Pittsburgh or something. Okay. So we can't really think of any political leaders coming out of Philadelphia. The political leaders coming out of Boston are myriad. Of course, the Bushes are from Connecticut, and they went to Yale. So Yale is also another Puritan institution. Yale and Harvard have always competed with one another. But who comes out of the University of Pennsylvania? What comes out of the University of Pennsylvania? Doctors, businessmen, and engineers. Who comes out of Harvard? Everybody else comes out of Harvard. Philadelphia's culture has remained distrustful of authority and hard to govern, yet tolerant of diversity. And it's the city of brotherly love. If you ever go to a sporting event in Philadelphia, close your ears, because they hate their own team more than they hate the other team. It is so bizarre. They get so angry. And of course, they've had some of the worst athletic teams in the history of athletics. The Phillies, of course, hold the record for most losses in the major leagues, as strange as that is. The Philadelphia Eagles have had they've been good from time to time, but it doesn't happen very often. Flyers aren't too bad right now. Philadelphia 76ers, they were good in the 70s, but they haven't been good since then. Anyway, so Boston, of course.
Boston Red Sox.
I'm sorry?
Boston Red Sox.
Boston Red Sox. Of course, they couldn't win for the longest time, and then all of a sudden, and they look strong this year, so we'll see what happens. As people immigrated to Boston and Philadelphia, they tended to adjust themselves to the prevailing cultural traditions as established by the Puritans and Quakers, respectively. So if you went if you were a relatively liberal individual, would you go to Boston, or would you go to Philadelphia? If you were liberals. If you're kind of a troublemaker, would you go to Philadelphia, or would you go to Boston?
Maybe a liberal would go to Philadelphia.
Yeah, you'd probably not get into trouble. If you went to Boston, you'd probably get arrested the first day. So you have to be very, very careful. Hence, the cities have been able to maintain the cultural traditions of their forebears, and even to this day, of course, the people in Boston are just a little bit stiffer. When we talk about segregation, Boston was segregated for an extended length of time. They were one of the last baseball teams to integrate. Philadelphia, on the other hand, they were one of the first teams to integrate. As odd as that may seem. Boston, when they integrated the schools down south, they also had to integrate the schools in Boston, because they had very strict lines as to whether you could go to a select school or not. So Boston had to integrate just like the South had to integrate. And of course, people in the South complained, well, look at Boston, look how long they had to bus in Boston. And they busted Boston for decades. Whereas in other places, of course, Indianapolis, for example, or Chicago, their schools were already integrated. They didn't have any problems with it. New York didn't have any problems with it. Baltimore didn't have any problems with it. Well, Baltimore's actually a southern city, as odd as that seems. Philadelphia didn't have any problems with it, but Boston did. Often we try to figure out what others are thinking when all we have to go on is what the people tell us or our observations of how they behave. So that's the end. I'm not going to talk about the Quakers and the Puritans anymore. But as we can see, because those two cultures evolved in a select way, the cities are still that way. And there are people in the United States that hate Boston. People that are more liberal, they hate Boston. And the reason they hate Boston is because it took so long for them to integrate. They were not, they were far more strict as far as racial bifurcation was concerned. Philadelphia, on the other hand, integrated almost instantaneously. University of Pennsylvania had African Americans long before the Harvard University did. They had African Americans back in the 18th century, and it took Harvard until after slavery was overthrown before they had any African Americans in their school. So how in the world do we figure out what other people are thinking? Pluralistic ignorance is the tendency for people to collectively misinterpret the thoughts that underlie other people's behavior. Pluralistic ignorance. So sometimes we just make a mistake. A good example of that would be when we invaded Iraq the first time. Remember the weapons of mass destruction? We were able to convince a lot of people, a lot of liberals in the United States, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Pluralistic ignorance. There were no weapons of mass destruction. We looked and we looked and we looked and we couldn't find any, damn it. Oh, man. And they were hungry for them. They were using anything as an excuse. Oh, no, this is the reason we went in there. And eventually, of course, we had to admit, no, there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. It was pluralistic ignorance on our part. A good example of pluralistic ignorance was divulged in the studies done looking at the German people after World War II by Hannah Arendt in 1964. Hannah Arendt is a socialist, and Hannah Arendt was trying to figure out, she wanted to prove that the German people were evil, that there was something wrong with these individuals. Maybe they're the ones that should be exterminated. Hannah Arendt is Jewish. But what she determined was that Nazism was not followed because the German people were evil. It was followed because they were thoughtless and conforming. And even to this day, if you go to Germany, the Germans do what they're supposed to do. They're very conforming people. Not a whole lot of liberals around in Germany. Everybody wears the same color clothes. It's the oddest. Well, when I was there, I was there in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s. It was really kind of weird because all their clothes were either black, gray, or olive drab, that dark color of green. That's it. They had some brown. No oranges, no reds, no bright greens. Everything was a dark color, like they were all camouflaging themselves in case the French invaded or something. Then you go across the border to France. I lived right on the French border. We used to go to France from time to time. You go across the border, everything's red and orange and yellow. They had yellow things. Oh my God, the Germans, it's like they were still trying to camouflage against a French attack or something. Just the most bizarre thing in the world. Thoughtless and conforming. I got in trouble because I didn't wash my stoop, my steps leading up to my house. In Germany, you always wash your steps every Thursday. Thursday, damn it, you better not do it on Friday. They'll give you a ticket. And I got a ticket, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Who washes their sidewalk? Who does that? Well, the Germans do, just to keep their community clean. When was the last time you washed your steps outside your house? And it's money. Germany's muddy. Well, it was back then. It's probably all cement now. Anyway, interesting, fascinating stuff, the Germans. So let's talk about how we do research in cultural psychology. I've got some pictures of naked people, and I apologize for that, but some people don't wear tops, okay? If we see it in a man, we don't think anything about it. But if we see it in a woman, we're going, that ain't right. So I got a couple pictures of women without their shirts on. But it's part of their culture, okay? Can we accept that? Or do you want me to skip over those pictures? Are we okay? Is everybody going to be all right? You're going to see some breasts. I apologize. You get to see some man nipples too, but you won't even notice that they're man nipples. I said man nipples. It's on the video. Oh man, am I going to get in trouble? They're going to fire me. Not this semester though. I'm teaching 9 classes. Okay, we're going to talk about how you study cultural psychology. What should always be the initial step in studying people from other cultures is to learn something about the culture under study. So if we don't know anything about the Blackfeet, the first thing we need to do is find a book about the Blackfeet. We need to find out something. If we're from here, and we go up there, and we go up to Montana, go up to Glacier, and we want to study the Blackfeet. We have got all these ideas about how you're supposed to do things because we have Navajo brains, right? And we think that there's only one way to do everything because that's the Navajo way, right? Is that the right way to think? So if we go up to Blackfeet country, one of the things we're going to have to do is take that portion of our brain that thinks there's only one way to do anything and just throw it out because we need to understand that these guys aren't the same as you guys are. Now part of it has to do with the fact that people up north are buffalo hunters, or they have been, for an extended length of time, right? You've got a herd. You got a herd. We still hunt. Okay, and they've got a herd on the Fort Belknap Reservation. And the Salish Kootenai have a herd. Okay. Or the Salish, whoever those flathead people are. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have to throw that portion of our brain out. Now that's one of the problems that Western men didn't had when they first started looking at other groups. They had that prejudice. They had that Western prejudice, and they couldn't get rid of it. So they went into a village, and when they saw that the women didn't have any shirts on, they got all upset. They got really upset when they found out that the women didn't wear any breeches. They weren't covering their sexual parts. They were really upset about that. That didn't happen here. It happened over in New Guinea. But really kind of interesting. We have to throw that portion of our brains out. Or we have to liberalize our brains just in order to understand what was going on as far as the Blackfeet are concerned, or as far as the Dene are concerned. A little bit of knowledge can go a long way in avoiding costly and embarrassing mistakes. And of course, one of the mistakes I made when I first came here was there's a death taboo that I should have adhered to that I haven't done a very good job with. Okay. Is it because I'm an arrogant bastard? Is that why I do that? No, I've dealt with death all my life. My God, that was my job for like 40 years, dealing with dead people. Sorry, it's just the way. So my whole history, my whole background has to do with death. I worked in a hospital. I worked in an emergency. I worked in a morgue. I worked in a cemetery. My goodness. So it's really hard for me to just remove that portion of my brain. But I'm trying to be good. I always tell you when I'm going to break a taboo. Like showing you a naked woman. There's a taboo against that, right? Women aren't supposed to. I'm not supposed to show you. That's pornography, isn't it? Naked people or pornography? Nah, okay, we're okay. We'll be fine. Schwader and his colleagues in 1997 were researching family meals. Schwader and his colleagues. And they went all around the world trying to figure out if people ate family meals. They sought information from rural India and called ahead to optimize their time there. You getting the picture? So they're looking at family meals in Germany, they're looking at family meals in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, and wherever they happen to be. They're looking at family meals. So they wanted to look at family meals in rural India. Though people in this area of rural India did not participate in family meals, an obliging local psychologist convinced a family to sit down at a table to simulate what the researchers were looking for. This is what they're looking for. They're looking for people eating together. But you guys don't do that, so let's pretend that you do. Is this good research or bad research?
Research.
Yeah, they called ahead and said, we're looking for family meals. And so the guy wanted to help them. He wanted to find a family meal. The researchers happily recorded their discovery and mistakenly included it in their research. Included it in their research. So if I tell somebody this is what I'm looking for, you want to be a nice guy and you want to give me what I'm looking for, right? And that's exactly what happened. And of course, this is what it looked like. That's a family meal in India. All these people are really confused because they don't eat that way. But here, of course, they're eating that way, just to make somebody happy. This is the way they eat. The men eat together and the women eat together. And the children eat with the women. That's the way they normally eat. That's okay. It's the way they eat. It's not, I don't have anything to do with it. Sorry. One can learn about another culture in a variety of different ways. The simplest way is to read existing texts and ethnographies about the culture. So you can read ethnographies, you can read texts, you can read books about it. Is there a good book about the Blackfeet? Who wrote it? Is she Blackfeet? Good. Then probably it's accurate. However, up on the Fort Belknap Reservation, who wrote the book about the Fort Belknap, the Grovon? Who wrote that book? Have you seen it?
No.
I've got copies of it at home. Do you want it? I can give you the copies.
I've probably seen it, but I've never.
They're the yellow books.
I was interested.
Actually, your dad got me these.
I know,
these
that's what I
copies.
was
Yeah,
saying.
he got me these copies. Yeah, they're the yellow books. They were written by a Catholic priest. How accurate are they? That's the question I always ask. How accurate are they? That's the question. It was written by a priest. A priest is interpreting what the Grovon are doing through his own mind. They're telling him something, and he's writing it down. Did he write it down correctly? Did he leave out any of the parts that embarrassed him or insulted him? I mean, people do that. We're not going to talk about men having oral sex with children, because that's too embarrassing, right? If you remember that group in New Guinea, that's how the boys became men, was by having oral sex with other teenage boys. As confusing as that is. So when we interpret things, we leave a lot of stuff. We will leave something out, something like child sacrifice. We don't want to put that in because that goes against our own morality. So sometimes the ethnographies are incorrect. Sometimes the texts are incorrect. We know that the Blackfeet text is fine because it was written by a Blackfeet. We don't know about the Grovon, the yellow books, because it was written by a priest. It was written by a white guy interpreting what the Indians were doing. And hopefully they gave him information. Sometimes there are secret ceremonies, right? Sometimes you're not supposed to tell people about things. A good example is, I don't know if you came in contact with this, but, here I'm standing in front of the camera. If you came in contact with this, but in the Nakota culture, they are controlled by clowns. They're the policemen of the tribe, are the clowns. And they have certain powers. But they can't tell anybody who they are. Because if they do, they'll lose their power. So how do you find out about the clowns? I know. How do you find out about them? Because they can't tell you who they are. You figured out. They also wear masks, so you don't know who they are. As confusing as this is. Does that all that make sense? So this is all secret stuff that they don't tell. They don't tell just everybody, because if they tell somebody, all the magic goes away. So you don't talk about this stuff. So how in the world is an ethnographer going to write any of this stuff down? Especially if they only spend a year there, or 6 months, or 6 weeks there. How in the world can they learn this? I know about it because I was there for 10 years, and I saw it, but it took time. And I had to come in contact with a lot of different people for any of this stuff to take place. One time, I was in the Harlem homecoming parade with Gerald. You know Gerald Stiffarm? And we dressed up like clowns. Of course, Gerald's Grovon. He's not Nakota. So we dressed up like clowns. And there was some white lady that was part of the group too. So we're clowns in the parade, which almost all parades have clowns, right? Scared the Nakota kids to death. I mean, they were screaming and running away from us, because in their culture, a clown is somebody that shakes their finger at you and punishes you. The Grovon kids thought it was funny, but the Nakota kids they were spooked, really spooked. It was really kind of bizarre. And here, this is a guy that had been on the reservation all of his life, and he's the one that put together this whole thing. Was he just trying to give me a hard time? I eventually figured it out. It took a while to figure it out. I couldn't figure out who the kids were that were running away and who the kids were that were asking for candy, because we had pockets full of business. But eventually I figured it out. It took a while, but I had to be there for an extended length of time. However, learning about a culture, though books and ethnographies limits you to learning about the ideas that the author had, it is their interpretation of what is relevant. Now, somebody who's Blackfeet, who's lived on the reservation all their life, sure, they could write a book and it's probably relatively accurate. Can the priest, no matter how long he's been there, can he write an accurate text? Well, maybe, but there's probably some things that he doesn't know, that he isn't being told. Maybe they're trying to give him information that's bad information, so he won't write down, he won't take away the magic. Is that?
Or he doesn't want to write down what is right, and he's swaying it a different way.
Exactly. Now remember, the Catholics, that's what they did with all the southern tribes, with all the tribes from South America, with all the tribes from Mexico. If you ask somebody who's Mexican how much Indian ancestry they have, how much native ancestry they have, what will they tell you? They probably will tell you they don't have any, because the priests told them that was bad for them to have any native ancestry. So they don't refer to themselves as being native. Sometimes after they've been in the United States, they adopt the idea that yes, we are native, and yes, we can do things that other Native Americans do. But if you go down to Mexico, you don't see that. They don't admit it, because the church has driven that out of them. As confusing as that may be. Another approach is to find a collaborator who is from the culture you are studying and who is interested in pursuing the same research with you. The more involved your collaborator is in the project, the more likely you will get accurate information. And of course, in the case of me up at Fort Belknap, it was Michelle's dad. He was a really good friend of mine. He was an excellent friend of mine, and he helped me a lot. He gave me a lot of information. Now, how much information of that was accurate? It was his interpretation of what was going on. Your dad is half Nakota and half Grover, right? His mother was, I can't remember which one was which. Anyway, his dad was one and his mother was the other. But he's full-blooded, kind of, and he's a full-blooded native from Fort Belknap, because his families, both of his families were Fort Belknap. As interesting as that is. Anyway, so you need to find a collaborator. And I had lots of friends up there. I still have lots of friends on Facebook. Your dad's not on Facebook, but John R.'s on Facebook.
He still has a flip phone.
He has a flip phone. Gene talks different. The Talks Difference, the Johnsons. Who else do I have? Am I friends with? The Stiff Arms, the Rutherfords. All of these people I have
What
on.
did you say?
Rutherford?
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 Rutherford.
Rutherford. Jeremy Rutherford.
Is that how you guys say it?
Do you know Jeff? Yeah.
No, well, we have Rutherfords on our reservation. We say it Rutherford. That's right.
Yeah, probably a different group. Remember,
Well, yeah.
Yeah, remember
okay,
you guys
all
are
right,
Blackfeet
all
and
right.
these guys are okay. These guys are Groma.
And she has Gardapi on her reservation, and so do I,
Right.
but we say it, or we spell it Gauardipe, and they say Gardipe.
You know they're not, Gardapis are Little Show. Gardapis are Little Show. The Chippewa. Not important. This is really not important. Well, you guys don't know how to pronounce Rutherford anyway. Yeah, they're growing. The International Association of CrossCultural Psychology is an organization of researchers studying culture and psychology from all around the world, and its members routinely find members from other countries to collaborate with on cross-cultural projects. Okay, so the organization, this is the organization that deals with cultural psychology. The International Association of Cross-Cultural Psychology. They look for collaborators in the society. They think that's the best way to get information. So if I were going to do research here, which I can't do, I had to sign a pledge that I would not do any research on this reservation. But if I could do research, what I would do, I would try to find somebody that wanted to be part of my research. Somebody who is from here, as a collaborator. That's what I would do.
Was that with the college? They had the pledge?
Yeah, I got in trouble at Fort Belknap for doing research on Fort Belknap. And because of that, I can't do research. I can't do research.
Is it because you're Gilligana, or is it?
No, it's because, no, Sarah can do research. No, I worked with the tribe to do my research up there, and I couldn't get them to agree to do my research. So I did my research anyway, but I did it off the reservation. And of course, they didn't think that was kosher. They didn't like that at all. So I got in trouble. So there are people wandering around, and I hope you don't know any of them, but there are people wandering around that really don't like me very much because they think I went against the culture. I didn't do what the tribe wanted me to do. It became a huge political issue.
So what kind of research was it?
I was doing research on resilience. Oh, yeah. You would think it would be something negative, but it was something positive. And I couldn't convince them that something positive was better research than something negative. I didn't want to look at drug abuse. I didn't want to look at alcoholism. I didn't want to look at child abuse or sexual abuse. I wanted to look at something positive. So I wanted to determine how resilient the people up there were. And of course, if I had shown that there was something negative going on, they could have gotten funds from the federal government. But since I was showing something positive, there's no way to get any money out of it. It is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. There are some people that really don't like me up there, but of course, you don't know any of them. They're all at this college and they all have one name, so. And you know what that name is, unfortunately. You and I both know what that name is. They don't like me very much. Here's the picture of the naked person. And actually, it's a picture of 3 naked people, but I don't know. Are you even noticing black ladies don't have a shirt on either? I don't know. Another effective strategy is to immerse oneself in another culture, to learn it firsthand, is to immerse yourself. This is an excellent way to gain a rich understanding of another culture, but it can be time-consuming and costly. Remember, these individuals teach at another institution. They teach someplace else. These researchers, they come from the University of Washington. They have to go back to the University of Washington. I taught at Fort Belknap College. So I was immersing myself in their culture. I didn't have to take my shirt off. Well, they don't. They take their shirts off up there. It's not that big a deal. Not the women, of course, but the men do. Here, even the men don't take their shirts off. Is that the way it's supposed to be? Men aren't supposed to take their shirts off?
Or sweat.
Never.
I never been with sweat down here.
Navajo men don't take their
Yeah,
shirts
I
off?
think the Navajo men, they sweat in a nude like the Salish and
I
Kootenai.
think they sweat by themselves without women, right?
Yeah, they sweat without the women. The women are way off, or they'll have them a separate day or something. And then the women, they will sweat, they'll sweat nude too. Salish and Kootenai, they're like the Navajo, you know, they sweat that way. I sweat with the Sioux, the Navajo, the Salish, the Blackfeet, the
Crow.
Lakota. No, I didn't.
Did you see the look on her face when I
I
said that?
No way.
The crow sweat nude also. They
Well, that
sweat.
explains a lot of I'm sorry I'm so racist towards Crow. It's like something that was instilled in me as a little girl.
As well, and it's not your fault.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not,
there you go. It's your tribe's fault.
yeah.
The crow sweat nude too. There's some crow up on the Fort Belknap reservation. First raised. I think that's a name.
The
a whole-
Navajos really get along good with the Crow for some reason.
Because they're probably the 2 biggest tribes in the States, and the culture is a little similar. The Crow and Navajo, they're both.
Crow speak a
Cultures.
Siouan language.
Like, they know their language. The Crows and the Navajo
Yeah, the Crow
know their
do, yeah.
language, and then Crows know their...
Well, why were the Crow allowed to keep their language, whereas they sent everybody else off to the
Because
woods?
they were traders.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, they were allowed to.
They didn't resist against,
The feds.
yeah,
Okay.
both tribes, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, they didn't fight against the feds. So let's pretend that's the reason. Okay, so what's happening here? Time-consuming process. There's no substitute for first-hand experience, of course, but you have to move up there. You have to move up there and live among the people. And of course, researchers don't want to do that. They want to go up for 6 weeks, 6 months, and get all the information they need, and then they can go back to wherever they are, wherever they're from, and go back to civilization, as it were. Go back to New York City.
So what would it take, like how long, like 2 or 3 years?
That's a good question. How long did it take me to figure out what was going on up on Fort Belknap? Yeah, 2 or 3 years. I contend that if you don't live someplace, you don't know the culture. You have to live in the culture to understand it. You can go on vacation to Germany for 6 weeks, and you won't have a clue what's going on in Germany. But I lived there for 3 years. I knew what was going on. I got in.
lived next to Hopi almost all my life. I still don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, well, you live next to them.
Remember, like, Tuba's right next to the Hopi?
Right.
So
Right.
we
But you
interact
didn't-
with them and everything, but I still, like,
You
I
didn't
go there
really.
when-
You didn't live in Hopi country.
Not in their
Right.
villages, but
Yeah.
pretty much known them,
But see, we see that a lot. I mean, there are people that live in cities, and their community will be right next to an African American community, but they don't really You don't live in the African American community, you live in the white community. So, and they don't know anything about black people. So that's relatively common. You can live near somebody, and one of the problems is if you live near somebody, then you develop stereotypes and prejudices against that group of people. Because you live next to them, but you don't live with them. If you can say, my best friend is, I have really good friends who are Hopi. I mean, if you could say that, then potentially they would tell you about their culture.
Yeah, I do. Some of them, they got their bean dances, and they'll be like, oh, come down and eat. My soul is happy.
Oh, there you go. So you really do know. You know a lot more.
Yeah, I don't like know the purpose of them. Or maybe I don't ask. Maybe I should ask more questions. But they're very their recipes are pretty, they call them poopy cookies. And people are always after them, but they don't give the recipe. Like they're handed down through their grandmas or whatever.
Poopy cookies. I like that name. They look like poop, but they don't taste it, obviously. They don't, or you wouldn't eat them. Are they good?
They're just sugar cookies, but they make them a certain way that...
Is it chocolate? Is that, no? Okay. What do they taste like?
With corn, isn't it?
No. I think it's white corn, and I don't know. I never...
What do they taste like? Do they have vanilla in them? I like things with vanilla.
Maybe I'll bring some Monday.
Okay. All right. Have you had them? Do you know what we're talking about?
One of my, I have a friend that's Hopi. I met his family and they got me Hopi cookies. They were really good. They don't sell them.
So you understand the culture?
A little bit. Yeah. Not enough.
Okay. Yeah, you have to be in the culture in order to. You're looking for something, you've lost something.
Oh, yeah, I lost something. It's okay.
1997, Patricia Greenfield was doing field research about the making of textiles in Mexico. Huge, this is huge when we talk about textiles. She gave the Zinocantecos women the same survey about textile making that she had used all over the world. Gave it to this group of women. The women became angry with her. She'd done this research all over the world. Nobody had ever gotten angry with her. But here she went down to Mexico. She gave the survey to the Zinocantecos women, and they got pissed. But there was a reason why they got pissed. The Zinocantecos women approached the survey as they would a conversation, which is logical. When Greenfield asked similar questions, a methodologically sound interview technique, asking them the same question over and over and over again to find out if they changed their answer, they thought that she was either stupid or making fun of them. And that's why they became angry. She hadn't confronted this anyplace else. This is a good technique to use, interviewing and asking a similar question over and over again. They thought she was stupid or making fun of them. So she got in trouble. And they didn't finish the survey. Everybody else finished the survey. All over the world they finished the survey. But not the Zinocantecos. They just got upset. And this is actually a picture of women who are Zinocantecos. I found a picture of women that were Zinocantecos. As you can see, very colorful outfits. Their textiles are very distinctive. And I don't know if they look distinctive or not, but those are women who are Zinocantecos. Having your methods perceived in identical ways across different cultures is termed methodological equivalence. Sometimes researchers have to adapt their procedures so that it is understandable in each culture equally. And this is really kind of difficult, because there are words that don't fit. There are words that you think are one thing, but they turn out to be something totally different. I'm sure there are words in Dene that if I read the definition, I would think one thing, and then it would be something totally different. The other day at Ray Austin's talk, Wilson was talking about ke. I can't even say it correctly, but he was talking about that. And he said it doesn't really mean family. It doesn't really mean clan. It means And he gave this long definition of what it meant. But of course, when somebody asks you what the definition is, you don't give them, you know, a paragraph of what ket is. You tell them that it's clans, it's family, it's something like that. But he was giving us this information. Now, so when you hear the word, which do you think of? And of course, he thinks of this long paragraph, and everybody else synthesizes it down to family or clan. So sometimes you're wrong, even though you're right. Sometimes you're wrong, and this makes it very, very difficult to compare one culture with another. The vast majority of cross-cultural research has been conducted between industrialized societies. The most common comparisons are between North Americans and East Asians. We don't compare ourselves with South Americans, we don't compare ourselves with Africans, we compare ourselves with East Asians. The two dominant groups in the world are Westerners and East Asians, the Chinese and the Japanese. Economically, Korea is very strong. Economically, Japan's very strong. Economically, China's very strong. Economically, Western Europe and the United States and Canada are very strong. So these are the two areas that we compare. Because if we're looking at psychology programs, the psychology programs in Africa aren't very strong, but the ones in Asia are very strong. So the only way that we know anything is if people do research. And the people doing research are mostly East Asians and North Americans are doing research.
As a psychologist, as a doctor of psychology, is it kind of like a goal for you to promote more research to your students, like to get them, what would you say, to get them motivated to start a research project?
That's the way Sarah feels.
I know at the University of Montana when
Sure.
I was going there, everybody was just like,
We have to do research. We have to do research, yeah. And it was kind of funny because if you look at the psychology department at the University of Montana, they were doing a lot of monkey research at that time. They had monkeys, so they were doing a lot of monkey research. So they felt that any research that wasn't hands-on and they didn't do a lot of qualitative, it was all quantitative research.
I was part of a study there with a lady, her name was Teresa Kamen, and it was like Bridges Tobacco, you know, a crossover.
What was her last name?
Kamen.
Okay, Teresa, okay. I know Teresa.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Well, anyway, she was doing a study on...
She doesn't like me, but that's okay.
the facial expressions and of a mother and a child, an infant, and their mother, you know, and the EKG and the heartbeat and everything, just with facial expressions, you know. So when I transferred over, we did that study, and it was interesting. It was kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, they're a little bit different.
It was good.
Yeah, they teach a little bit differently. Do all psychologists, are they looking for research? I'm not, but Sarah is. Sarah was a researcher. I mean, that was her job before she started teaching. And it was, she was teaching while she was doing a lot of research. So this is really important to her. I'm not saying, I'm certainly not saying she's wrong. I'm saying that it's not as important to you. That's what I'm saying. Okay. But it's extremely important to her. And since I can't do any research here anyway, you know, I'm kind of stuck. I'm about to retire anyway. I don't want to scare anybody. I'll stay as long as you guys do. But I'm old. I'm tired.
If they get teachers.
I will, I'll be here for probably, I don't know. I have no idea. My wife's already pressuring me to retire, so. I'm 67 years old. I'll be 68 next month. So.
You can't retire yet. We don't even have the first graduate
Cohort. Now, I'm not going to retire. No, I'm sticking around. I'll be around for a while. I'll make sure that, I want to make sure that we get rid of Brandon. So this is really important to me. And Jeff's leaving in the spring, right? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'll stick around for a while. I've still got lots of energy, but it's 9 classes. I'm teaching 9 classes. Anyway, and I'm having such a good time. I get to swear in class. This is great. Even on camera, I still don't get in trouble. Okay, so what's happening here? Research. So it's really important to Sarah, and I'm not saying she's incorrect. I'm saying she is correct. Without research, psychology is nothing. So we need the research. I think there's a lot of good research out there, but there's some research that people are just doing to do it. And that's, it skews people's ideas about things. And we have really dumb people, obviously. Here, this lady did her research. This premier researcher did her research, went down to Mexico, and the people told her she was wrong. I have other examples of people that did things that were wrong. Studying college students from different cultures also lends itself to making meaningful comparisons, as students the world over tend to be familiar with many of the kinds of procedures used in psychological studies. The college students tend to be an accessible sample for most university researchers, and that's usually where we do our research. It's easier, it's cheaper. I don't want to have to go up to Montana where there's no place to stay. There used to be a motel in Harlem, but they closed, the Pink Motel. Remember the Pink Motel? Okay. It's closed. So where am I going to stay in Harlem? I can't stay with your dad. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, doesn't he?
He has a 2-bedroom house on the rest.
Oh, he's got that house. That's right. He doesn't have a car. Does he have a car yet? Thank God. Oh my goodness. Always had to pick your dad up.
He has it, but he wants to walk to the
casino. Where does he walk? He walks from his house to the casino. The casino's like a half mile down the road, I guess.
What's the casino called?
I don't know, Fort Belknap Casino, I guess.
It's Indian Casino?
Yeah, oh yeah. But it was financed by the Chickasaw down in Oklahoma. Yeah. So all their money goes down to Oklahoma. Well, we won't go into that. That's a huge controversy up on that reservation anyway. Okay, so who do we do our research on? We do it on you guys. Now the reality in most institutions, most of the students are traditional students. Traditional students means that they just graduated from high school and they're between the age of 18 years old and 22 years old. So if you're older than 25, you're a non-traditional student. Most institutions do not have a lot of non-traditional students. Most institutions have a lot of traditional students. So these are puppies, these are babies, these are kids. They just graduated from high school. And that's what we're doing research on and pretending that this is accurate research. We're looking at a specific demographic. We're looking at males and females between the ages of 18 and 25. And that's almost all the research that's coming out of the universities around the United States.
Is that why they call it weird?
I'm sorry?
Weird research?
Right, it is weird research because it's Western. All of these are kids from white Anglo-Saxon Protestant families. Most of them are. That clock is inaccurate. Don't get me looking at the clock. When researchers overemphasize college students, there tends to be a significant problem with generalizability. The research can't be generalized with any populations but other college students. Well, we do it anyway. We pretend that these college students are representative of the entire United States. But in order to be representative of the entire United States, could I do research here and say that's the way all the Indians are in the United States? No. No, this population has their culture. Their culture is very different from other natives. Can I say that?
Yes.
Okay. The Blackfeet and the Gros-Ventres are very similar. You're both Plains Indians. Okay. You guys are taller than the group. You're actually allies for an extended length of time. But not the Dakota. You were. Oh, you were. Just like the Pegan were your allies.
The what?
Pegan.
Pagan?
Pegan.
Pagan.
Oh, jeez.
Pagan
You
is
guys
part
mispronounce.
of my tribe.
You mispronounce practically everything.
Pagan. No, the Pagan are part of our tribe. The Siksika, Pagan, Kainai, and Kani. And we're Kani. Up north in Canada is the Pagan, Siksika, Kainai.
I shouldn't tell you about your own tribe, should I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm giving you information that other people have given me when I was on the Fort Belknap Reservation. And you guys don't call them the Grobon, you call them the Atsana. Which I had never heard that word before. Yeah, I'd never heard that word before. So, and in your museum, you've got all kinds of Atsana stuff because they were your allies for an extended length of time. Not in the end, though. In the end, they attacked you with a crow. Anyway, you guys beat them up. Mountain Chief is the one that defeated them. Overusing students affects power, of course. Power reflects the quality of the design of the study and determines if your design is sensitive enough to identify the anticipated effects. Sometimes the hypothesis is correct, but the design doesn't have the power to be able to provide support for the hypothesis. And of course, Sarah talks about this in research methods. She's talking about it probably right now. You guys are putting together research, right? Isn't that what your job is? Mm-hmm. And she's probably not talking about, she's not using the word power, but she is talking about your design not supporting your hypothesis.
Reliability and, yeah, I took the class on that, I can't remember it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I can't remember it either, and half the time, even in psychology, they use different words, as confusing as that is. In cross-cultural studies, culture should always be an independent variable. Should always be a variable. Now here you don't really have to worry about that, right? Because you're only dealing with one culture. Or are you? So we do research here on the Dene Reservation. I'm sorry, the Navajo Reservation. Navajo Nation. They haven't changed the name yet, have they? Okay. If we're doing research here, are we dealing with only one culture?
That's a good question because, like, I'm taking foundations in Navajo culture right now.
Right.
And there's a few videos that we have to watch on YouTube, and one of them was saying that my Dishkishni, you know, is a Pueblo. What it was is the Navajo ran out of women. So what they did is they went over to the Jemez people, and Jemez are Pueblo. So they went over that way to the Coyote Pass people, and they brought back some women. So then you have some Navajo, well, I always ask them, you know, well then, if you're part Maidishkishni, that doesn't mean you're full-blooded Navajo. If you're part Nakai Dene, does that mean you're full-blooded Navajo, you know? But they always tell me, no, no. And with their culture, a good study would be, how come they didn't get their bloodline broken down like me and Michelle did up north?
Right.
And versus them, you know, where they're full-blooded and they're half-blooded. And if we did do it, what would their real bloodline be? You know?
Right.
Or is it just
Navajos, they just use names for everything. You know, like all these places, you see a rock, it's round. Oh, that's Round Rock.
Yeah.
Rock Point. So that's what they did with the clan system, is they named, you know, like Zuni, Tampaha. My clan is actually say it's Zuni, but it doesn't mean I'm Zuni. You know, like a Pueblo. I'm still full Navajo, but it's just a name. I don't know how to describe it, but that's like the best way I can describe.
And see, like, you're from over by Tuba City, and my husband would say, well, my grandpa's from my discussion, and his grandpa used to say that they came from that place, but now they're here. So this is where they say they're from. So my question would be to him all the time is, well, does that mean that you have Hamas in here, but I don't know.
Would you ask that question to somebody up on the Blackfeet Reservation?
Oh my God, you would have to say, I am your 10th cousin through your cousin who was married to my uncle's sister's daughters, brothers, mom. That doesn't even make sense.
Right. Yeah. But you have a certificate of Indian blood.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody have a certificate of Indian blood? Everybody's got one? Okay.
And I have to show mine literally around here because they don't think I'm Indian. They don't think I'm native.
She doesn't look native, does she? I'm just kidding.
Some people used to think I was white. They thought I was a white lady. Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
she is. Yeah, hey, we're brothers.
Yeah.
We're the same color. Hey, what's going on there? Okay. Either I've been out in the sun too much. You haven't been in the sun enough.
Well, the white people down here are really dark.
Oh. Oh, this is too confusing for me.
It is. But that would be a good study.
Yeah, it would be a good study, except I don't know if you could get it approved. The tribe has to approve everything. So does the college. This college has to approve. And actually, Sarah's in charge of the IRB at this institution, so that ought to be interesting to see what kind of research is approved. But even after it's approved here on this reservation, or at this college, it also has to be approved
by the tribe.
By the tribe, exactly. Exactly.
She said nothing leaves the classroom, whatever you do in that class.
Right. Right. In which case, nobody's going to find out about it, so you don't have to worry about it. Right. But they always find out. Well, they found out in my case. And I got into all kinds of interesting trouble. I actually went to the tribal council and tried to get it approved. My research approved, and they wouldn't. It had to do with suicide and resilience, because resilience, the more resilience you have, the less likely you are to commit suicide. So it was kind of a suicide prevention thing. And people who have had suicide in their family don't like the idea of suicide. That's the way it turned out. Okay, so what are we doing? If researchers contrast two similar cultures, they would not have much variance in their independent variables as if they had compared two very dissimilar cultures. So if we compare the Navajo culture with the Crow, just like Michelle was saying, very similar cultures, similar taboos, they both maintain their language very, very well. The Blackfeet have been able to maintain their language relatively well. You guys, yeah, you do a pretty good job. The Grovan, on the other hand, and the Nakota, my God, those poor guys, they've almost lost their language. They had to start an immersion school in order to revive the Grovan language.
Well, actually, the immersion school started from the Blackfeet Reservation, from kindergarten all the way up, because we almost lost our language, but it was promoted throughout Montana, but we got it from the Hawaiians and how to run an immersion school, because the Hawaiians are the ones that really actually started it.
So the Grovan stole it from you guys, and you guys stole it from the Hawaiians. Is that what I'm hearing?
We gave it to, we didn't give it, we shared it, because we want everybody to know their language.
I think that's a good idea as well.
Yeah.
Of course, you don't have to be Grovan in order to go to the immersion school. They have white people at the immersion school, which is kind of confusing. Psychological concepts do not always translate from one culture to the next. The Japanese ame has no equivalent in English. Ame is inappropriate behavior that shows dependence on someone else. It's kind of like being codependent. But we really don't have a word for this concept. And this is seen as a very positive thing. that my relationship with you is so strong that I act like a child when I'm with you. I know it's really hard to explain, but that's, you take care of me, and I don't take care of myself because, and that's ame, and that's considered a positive thing. The German word Schadenfreude has no equivalent in English. It means the pleasant feeling you get when somebody else fails. Seeing somebody else fail. I know, it's like the meanest thing in the whole wide world. So we get these television shows coming out of Europe. Survivor, for example. Why do we watch Survivor? Survivor is about all these people being mean to each other and then somebody getting voted off the island. Isn't that the way it works? Okay. They get voted off the island, and we're celebrating the fact that we're still here and they're gone. If you think about it, shouldn't we be sad that these people are gone? That they failed? Why do we feel good about somebody's failure? I have Schadenfreude with the New York Yankees. I want to see them lose every game. And I almost said a swear word. I want to see them lose every game. I hate them so much. It's a game. That's kind of like Schadenfreude. But the problem with Schadenfreude, of course, remember the Germans are the ones that came up with this whole fascist Nazi concept where they didn't just drive people away. They didn't just chase them out. They got rid of them by killing them en masse. They tried to exterminate not just the Jewish people. They were the largest group that they tried to exterminate. They also tried to exterminate the gypsies and evangelical Christians and people with disabilities. They also executed all of those people. Did they feel bad about it? No, they've got Schadenfreude. At least it wasn't them. I know, this is so bizarre, isn't it? Fago has no equivalent in English. Fago is a mark of maturity that shows compassion for the weak and love and sadness for them. We don't have any word for that. The Chinese have no translation for the word self-esteem because they're a collectivist society. So they have no concept of self-esteem. This is a sign in a Chinese hotel that says, "Please don't accept strangler's invitation so as not to be cheated." Stranglers? Really? We have to stop right now. It's 11:50. Sorry. Schadenfreude. So you guys need to practice your Schadenfreude. Watch people tripping over bananas and laughing at them. Wow! How horrible is that?